Hi, I'm Peter Beard. Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show.
Welcome to the Sarah O'Connell Show. You are, of course, a world-renowned director and producer who last year won a BAFTA for Best Documentary.
Yes.
First of all, how did it feel to win that, and what can you tell us about that production?
It felt amazing to win that award. Several reasons. I mean, one would be, it's obviously lovely to have praise your work, but it was also, I think it was really important for Sally, who was the main contributor in the film. That whole process, I felt quite. I'm not sure if you've seen that. It's about a mother who loses her son to terrorism. He becomes a terrorist, and then ends up perpetrating really, really hideous crimes, which was a very difficult thing for Sally about. But I think I think the process of things like the BAFTA and stuff have really sort of validated that she'd made the right decision in making the documentary, and that what she did was quite important, and actually sharing your story can have quite a big impact. And there was lots of press about it at the time, which was very nice. But I think something like that, which people say this is a good film, for her was really important. And for me, I really enjoyed the whole thing because it's brilliant. But equally, I am nervous. I was about as nervous as I've ever been about anything that day. So, there was the moment just before they read out whether you've won or not. I sort of equally to win, but didn't want to win at the same time, because I thought, God, I have to go and stand up in front of all these people and give a speech. So maybe now, if the sort of everything stopped, it would be brilliant.
I've got the exact same problem with this YouTube channel. I don't want to make it too good, because then I'll have to start writing speeches and stuff, so I'll make it average. So your most current show is called Kids on the Edge, and the first episode was called The Gender Clinic.
Yes.
And it followed two families which were going to the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic. What can you tell us about that?
About the film?
Yes.
So it was the first time. So the Tavistock have the nation's only. Have Britain's, this is not actually Britain's, England's only gender identity development service for under 18. So it's obviously something which is discussed a lot in the press, and has been discussed a lot in the press, and there's been quite a few documentaries about over the years, but it's the first time that the Tavistock wanted access to a television company to look at the sort of inside workings of the gender identity development service and what they do there, and I suppose more importantly their list of service users. So for us, I mean, obviously what you see in the film is two families, but we're a long time researching the documentary before we ever got to the point of filming with those two families. So in fact, it's I think we spoke to about 100 families in total.
Wow, yeah.
That range from children that were about 5 right up to sort of 17-year-olds that are about to leave the service.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was just sort of trying to think of what the everyday, I guess, what the everyday issues are for people with gender dysphoria growing up in Britain at the moment. I sort of personally was quite intent from the beginning that I didn't just want it to be a documentary about whether people were going to sort of interventions and lots of those things that we'd seen on the TV before. I thought, I didn't want it to be somebody going, the opening sequence, somebody going through their wardrobe out the new sort of outfits they've just bought and all those things.
Cool stuff, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because I thought actually, there's a few really big decisions that people have to make in their sort of in their journey through the gender identity development service. Things like sort of physical interventions, and whether to transition and how you transition and how you tell people and things like that. They're really big decisions, but actually based on what it was like every day for people going through this, and what the sort of the realities of of making a decision like socially transitioning, things like that were. To find people that could articulate that in the right way was tough. Also, you know, that sort of old thing about never film with children or animals.
Yeah.
It comes from now, because getting young children to talk about really challenging things is quite difficult. So finding the right individuals who have the ability to articulate things in a way that can be understood by everyone, that also want to do it, that are emotionally robust enough to be able to sort of take on a documentary like this, and the sort of press coverage that can, was quite challenging. But actually, I think as soon as I met Ash's family and Matt's family, and those two individuals, it became quite that they had really important things to say, and were coming at it from maybe slightly different angles, but would give a real insight into people. I guess the other thing that I wanted to do as normal as possible. So to find sort of really typical families that were going through it. So that, you know, quite often it representations of sort of in the media of gender dysphoria and sort of trans issues and things often stray into the sort of sensationalist side of things.
Yeah, they do.
Showing that it's normal people that go through this felt really important to do. So finding Ash's family and Matt's family, when I thought, you know, this could be my family home, and from that we sort of built on things really, I suppose.
So I think the latest figures are that there's about 650,000 trans people in the UK. So you know, they're sort of everywhere, and they just exist and have lives and families and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's good too, just to sort of put across the point that it's not just adults that suddenly decide they're transgender or something. You know, it's something you're born with, and you know, there's kids today dealing with it in schools, and there's not real equality yet. And I think it was very sort of sensitively handled, the way it sort of you know, told the children's stories, and I think it was sort of really well received because of that as well.
I think, you know, where things probably have progressed in the last few years, I mean, certainly since I was at school, is that kids are listened to a bit more about those sorts of things. So I imagine, you know, historically, you know, there've probably always been children with gender dysphoria, but it was sort of dispelled and not listened to, and you know, a lot of the time, whereas now, you know, thankfully, I mean, I think it still is a struggle for lots of kids, and bullying is still sort of rife around this subject. But I think that lots of schools and lots of sort of doctors and stuff will listen to kids now, and maybe be a bit more prepared to sort of take it seriously. So I think it sort of showed that actually that you know, the Tavistock have not just with their gender identity service, but with all of the services, you know, have a sort of child that you should listen to what the young person is communicating to you and take it seriously. And I think we sort of tried to reflect that in the film by giving the sort of young people of the subject as possible. So it's not a film about the Tavistock; it's a film about the young people involved in it, and how the sort of Tavistock they offer a bit of commentary and you know, sort of you see their interactions, but really it's about Matt's experience of this and Ash's experience of it, and Terry and Rachel's experience of it, the sort of mothers, and how they, because it is really challenging. You know, I think the two mums came at it from slightly different positions, in that Terry almost immediately, his mum sort of embraced Ash's decision, knew it was going to be difficult, but thought I'll support Ash as much as I can.
Yeah.
I think Rachel personally struggled with it slightly more, struggled with what people would think, struggled with the idea of sort of losing her daughter, which is something that lots of parents have spoken to us, this sort of feeling like, you know, the child is born, you have certain, you know, literally I've got two of my own kids, you look in your sort of children's eyes on that first day that you hold on to them, and you have you suddenly imagine their whole life in front of them. Yeah. A lot of parents find it quite hard to sort of think, well, that's going to be a bit different now, and actually, you know, it's not that different. It's just that people will be you know, presenting themselves in a slightly different way in terms of their gender identity. But I think lots of people have this sort of this idea that it's going to completely change, and they then start sort of grieving for the child they're losing. And actually, you've got to listen to that as well, because for someone like Rachel, that was a very real emotion and experience that she was going through, and that obviously affects the way that she interacts. So it's not as simple as saying, well, that's not right. So we tried to give them space, but it was really interesting seeing the sort of, for me personally, seeing the different sides and trying to work out where I would sit as a parent in the middle of that. I think, having someone who's sort of grown up not having any challenges with their gender identity, I think I was viewing it as a sort of an outside observer, was how I would deal with it as a parent, and how I deal with it with my children. And I think it's sort of quite a challenging issue because parents on the whole want to do the best for their kids. And actually, I think with sort of trans issues, lots of parents now, rather than just ignoring it, they sort of want to fix it. They think that they're, let's come up with a sort of simple set of solutions that's going to make my child happy.
Yeah. Well, the
reality is
solution, isn't it? So,
no, what I tried to put across in the film was that it's a really complex issue, of which there are no answers. Right? So there's no point. It's caused by this, and therefore you should do this. It's not that simple. It's all sort of very enigmatic and ambiguous, and it's different for each individual. And actually, what you need to do is just give people sort of space and time to be the person they want to be, rather than trying to railroad them into any particular sort of solution, I suppose. Because and Ash don't need to be fixed. There's nothing that sort of it's not like they've got an illness.
Exactly, and I think that was part of the sort of misunderstanding before, when there wasn't as much awareness. It's I think the important thing is that the child is happy in whatever their circumstances are, and whatever they need to be happy, and also just understanding that it's not that they've lost their child or they're not there anymore. It's that the kid was always the person that they're saying they are. And it's just sort of understanding that, so they may have a different name and different pronouns and all that kind of stuff, but they're still your child, they're still the same person, they still exist. And it's just sort of trying to support them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, hopefully what it's doing is it's sort of, in fact, creating the best version of your child, because it's the happiest version of your child, the one who feels the most comfortable in themselves, rather than somebody who's sort of feeling like they can't live in the way they want to.
That's it, and I think as a parent, the thing you should want the most is for your child to be happy and just be able to be themselves, just as anybody else can.
Mm-hmm. I think actually, interestingly, even that we met who weren't. In fact, I met very few parents that weren't supportive. I think the sort of people that come forward to talk to you tend to be ones that are quite supportive. But I think the ones that hadn't embraced it so easily, it was more a sort of fear for their child rather than a sort of personal bigotry.
Yeah.
It was like worrying that actually this was going to lead to a sort of future where they didn't fit in, or bullying. Massive fear from parents is that their kids are going to be really horrendously bullied. So I don't think I'm coming at it from the wrong place. They just might have been coming at it with a slight sort of misunderstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think you learned from that production yourself?
From the process?
Yeah.
I learned straight away that it was a lot more complicated than my understanding of it. I think anyone else just sort of having read the headlines in newspapers and sort of, potentially sort of saying, how can a 5-year-old ever make this sort of decision and all those sort of things. So what I learned is that it is very complicated, and gender identity is not something which is sort of straightforward in any way. And more than anything, actually, it made me reflect on our sort of binary system. This sort of idea that you've got to fit into one of these two very sort of defined camps. I don't think it's in the film anymore, but there used to be a sentence in there that said, it's the question that's asked about you before you're even born.
Yeah.
Are you a boy or are you a girl? and that sort of those two words go on to define so much about you as a human being for the rest of your life. And for you know, a massive proportion of society that affect them, but for other people that has an enormous impact on them. You know, not feeling like you fit into one of them can be so difficult. So I think, and then I started. So that just sort of makes you think about how, you know, how so much of our life is defined. You know, the way that we act and the way that we sort of the stereotypes that we live up to and the clothes that we wear and all those sorts of things, the toys that we play with, how so much of that is dictated by whether, you know, that you have the label of. And that's why I think actually for younger children, for little kids like the ones in my film or our film, they're still quite binary of gender. So it's that I'm not a little boy, I'm a little girl, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Because when you're little, it really is like that. But actually, lots of the teenagers that I spoke to a slightly more progressive view of gender, it not being as sort of simple as I'm a man or a woman, but actually being able to sort of be prepared to think about other and where they sort of fit into a spectrum rather than where they fit into this binary system. So I think if I was going to take something about my sort of hopes for society moving forward, embracing of a sort of variety of gender identities and sort of representations, rather than us having to live in this sort of very binary dictatorial system that we sort of have lived in for a long time now.
Absolutely. Now that there wasn't just, of course, one episode in this series. The second one was called The Last Chance School, and it covered 3 children from Gloucester House which had behavioural.
Gloucester House, yeah.
So what can you tell us about that?
Oh, sorry, I lost you a little bit there at the end.
What can you tell us about the second episode?
So the second episode, Gloucester House, was so when we got access to the Tavistock and Portland Trust, it wasn't we were sort of agent services and see which ones we can make films about, and I came on quite sort of late in the production, I suppose. So lots of places had already been looked at. One of them was Gloucester House, and people suggested over there. And from the sort of moment I walked in there, it's quite chaotic. As you can see in the film, there's lots of sort of kids running around and challenging behaviour. But equally, I just thought, God, this has got an incredibly hopeful aspiration for these children. These are sort of kids that, you know, about, and, you know, some of us may have come across in our lives that are really challenging, and you just sort of think, well, that kid's going to end up in prison. But actually, the aspiration for sort of kids in Gloucester House is that all of them could go on to sort of live the life that we all want to. And I have actually had the opportunity to go to other sort of schools for issues, and lots of them I haven't felt at that. I felt that they are sort of holding pens for children that whose future is already sort of marked for them.
Yeah.
And I went into Gloucester House. What I realised was that the sort of headline for this place is that your future is not written for you. You can have this sort of hideous background. You can have these horrible things happen to you, but with the right support, anyone can go on to live the life they want. And I think the 3 kids in our film are sort of testament to that. They've all had challenging starts in life, you know, none of which is their own fault. Potentially, you know, some of them it's not their family's fault. Luke, for instance, losing his mother when he was so little, you know, that obviously had a massive impact on his mum and how she was able to deal with things.
Yeah, of course.
But he's incredible, you know. But she's incredibly loving to Luke. It was Luke's 12th birthday yesterday.
How was that?
We went to I went to his birthday party, and Emily, who produced who's the real sort of powerhouse behind the series. And it was incredible. It was lovely to see sort of Luke doing so well. So I think that's what struck me about that place, that it has this sort of high ambitions, these high hopes for kids that have had this sort of work, and it sort of made me quite hopeful about the world, because I sort of think a world where a place like Gloucester House exists is quite a good one.
Yeah,
We'll put in as much sort of effort and stuff as we can to kids who need our help. Really, that's the sort of society that I want to live in.
that's it. I think every kid sort of got their own unique needs or support needs, you know, and it's just about making sure that everybody is sort of catered for and not forgotten about. And it's great that there's places like Gloucester House that can sort of help with that.
Totally. And then did you see the last film that was?
Yes, Troubled Girls. Now that was the one about two self-harming girls, wasn't it? Who got support as well, and that must have been a tough one to work on.
I didn't actually direct that film. That was directed by a director called Tim Lawton. But in my role as the series director, I sort of had a little bit to do with the film.
Yeah.
I think what that was, if you like, the sort of most extreme end of the scale, which is what happens with young people when they sort of when they haven't necessarily had all the help that they need, or when, you know, it hasn't been identified early enough, or when the sort of thing has prevented them sort of accessing the help that they need. And I think, but it's still, you know, I think it's quite challenging to watch the third film, but I think hopefully still shows that have a voice and they've got something to say, and they can be helped, and equally, you know, services are really challenged at the moment. CAM services, they're really underfunded, and when you've got a mental health disorder, it's not like having something like cancer, where you know, if it gets too long, everyone's up in arms. For mental health disorders get too long, it seems to slightly get forgotten, really. And I think what they showed, what the sort of the power of interventions with these people, and the power of sort of when you can engage with services, the positive effects it can have. And actually, the Tavistock do incredibly well with the sort of resources that they have to help as many people as they can. I think in some of the sort of other areas of the UK, it can be a lot more difficult to get the help that you need.
Absolutely, and I kind of hope that the whole series will, you know, help other people perhaps going through it that don't necessarily know what to do or who to talk to, and know that, you know, there is sort of hope out there and there is support, and, you know, but, you know, I think we just sort of need more of it. Totally.
I mean, that would be, if anyone took anything from the series, I think it would be the power of early intervention. You know, that there's no point firefighting once it gets to a point where you can't help, you know, where it's very difficult. The earlier we can help people, as soon as problems start arising, the better. But that requires investment at an early stage. You know, it requires investment in mental health services, and actually, in the long run, it creates a sort of, it means that there's not so many people having to go into sort of further support down the line, and potentially people. So it helps society in general. It's more cost effective, but more importantly, those individuals. You know, if you can sort of prevent problems arising rather than having to deal with them once they're there, it's better for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. And so what kind of feedback have you had about the series since it's been broadcast?
Feedback, yeah, tremendously positive. Yeah, everyone seems to have liked it a lot. Yeah, right from sort of reviews through to sort of responses from Twitter, through to individuals who have emailed us, other service users, right through to sort of people like my mum liking it, which is always important.
That's always
so yeah. Yeah, so no, it's been really good. I think everyone has liked the sort of sensitivity of its approach, the fact that we haven't tried to sensationalize vulnerable young people, which I think is always the worry when you're making stuff about children.
Absolutely, because it's not even it being with children, but they're just very sort of sensitive subjects by themselves, and I think they're all sort of handled really sort of sensitively and respectfully, and yeah, I think they you know, they're sort of all essential viewing, I think.
Great, and most importantly, actually, I think the contributors have had really good feedback. So all of the people in all of the films have had a tremendous thing. The one thing that I found sort of amazing actually was that Matt, in the gender film, who had included in the film the sort of level of bullying that he'd faced, he actually had some sort of quite apologetic messages from some of the people that had bullied him.
Good, that's really good.
So if it's even had that sort of that impact, then that's incredible.
Yes, I guess some people perhaps don't have an awareness of, you know, a lot of people just sort of know their own experience and don't sort of think outside of that, of what other people might be going through. And, you know, I think programs like that should hopefully help that. And if they can tackle bullying, then fantastic.
Yeah, that's the idea.
So finally, can you say anything yet about what you might be working on next?
So I'm starting I can't tell you too many details, but a new series which is about it's about a specialist police unit.
I wish you the very best with it. Where can people go to sort of find out more about you online? Maybe on Twitter. Have you got a website? Where can they look you up? Yeah,
so I along with another director, Dave Nath, I run a company called Story Films. So if they want to look us up, or I'm on Twitter as Peter G Beard, which has got links to my website where they can find out more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time today, coming on the Sarah O'Connell show, and
my pleasure.
Thank you for producing such a fantastic series. I encourage everybody to go and watch it, and hopefully speak to you again soon. Take care.
Thanks ever so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.